Thanks, right at the top. Okay, I think that means we're official now. Welcome to you all in the room and to a few guests who are joining us on Zoom here. I'm Jamie Apgar, as you see on the screen, Organist and Choirmaster here at the Parish of the Good Shepherd. And just for all of you who are both familiar and less familiar with this place, I'm providing a little more scaffolding in case someone out on the big wide interwebs finds this recording someday and wishes to understand more about where we're coming from and who we are in the context that we're in. Jay invited me to use this space partly as a way of kind of introducing myself to you in a more focused way. The way I think for you to understand who I am as a musician and a scholar is to understand how I approach music. What is my lens and perspective when I engage with the music that we bring to our choir and to our congregation. So I want to give you a bit of a window into my kind of mental process today. And I think that will also perhaps open up some new perspectives for you all on a couple of pieces. So I'm going to start by inviting you to join me, if you wish, in singing a hymn from our hymnal. It's one that, excuse me, I've gone away here. This mouse gets very small. It's one that you may know. It's not the most familiar of hymns, although you should know the name of the composer because we just sang some of his music in worship today. So this is hymn 692, I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say. Info is at the bottom of the screen. You can see there. The text is Horatius Bonar, who wrote a number of excellent texts that are in our 1982 hymnal. Looks like we've got another guest joining us here. Let's see if I can let Mary in. Okay, welcome, Mary, if you can hear me. And then music is down at the bottom of the page. It says the third tune, composed by Thomas Tallis, who also composed, for those of you who were in worship this morning, who composed the communion anthem that we sang, O Sacrum Convivium, which we'll return to a little later in our time together today. And so I wanted to just sing through this actually, and then lead us through a little bit of an exercise that shows you what interests me about this piece, the kinds of questions I would ask about it, the kinds of details I attend to. And so that we're going to then do that exercise, and then we're going to circle back to this hymn, maybe sing another verse at the end, and then I hope you'll have gained a kind of a new perspective on it and how to engage with it, some of the questions you might ask of it. Well, if you wish, you don't have to sing, and you can also just follow my voice because I'm going to lead this singing here. We've also got Louise, who I'm letting in. Welcome, Louise, if you're able to hear me. So we're going to start by singing this hymn together. If you wish, just follow my voice. This is our first note. I heard the voice of Jesus say, come unto me and rest, and in your weariness lay down your head upon my breast. I came to Jesus as I was, so weary, worn and sad. I found in him a resting place, and he has made me glad. Let's do the second verse. I heard the voice of Jesus say, Behold, I freely give the living water, thirsty one, stoop down and drink and live. I came to Jesus and I drank of that life-giving stream. My thirst was quenched, my soul revived, and now I live in Him. Thank you. We'll pause there. Okay. If you can, just take about 20 seconds and capture any thoughts, feelings, or associations that come up for you when you sing this hymn. Images, moments of your life, people in your life, bits of history that you know about the church or about music, anything like that. Just capture those, capture one or two if you can, and just hold it with you. Okay, great. Now I want to lead us through a little bit of an exercise that'll, I hope, give us a different sort of window onto this. So I'm going to ask us just to listen, and for those of us who don't read music, I'm going to have the score of this piece playing on the screen as it goes by. And in fact, I've discovered that it works better if I use Safari itself. So I'm doing that here. So the score of this piece is going to play and scroll across the screen as it goes by. If you don't read music, don't worry about it. Just enjoy the sound. And again, pay attention to what you're thinking about the piece. What does this piece mean to you? What does it bring up for you? What bits of information or experience outside this piece do you attach to it or bring to it? And so we're just going to listen and then kind of tear into it a little bit. Okay. And those of us in the room had the advantage of knowing the piece or having heard it during worship this morning. If you're on Zoom and weren't able to join us for worship this morning, that was O Sacrum Convivium, which is a motet by Thomas Tallis. And so what I want to do now is show you the original, what the original music for this piece looked like. And that will give us a bit of a different take on it. I wonder, take just a few seconds to kind of look at this. And for those, especially those who are readers of music, but even those who are not, or have only seen a bit of sheet music and don't necessarily understand a lot how it works, you may be able to see some key differences here between the modern score that was scrolling on that screen and then this, the original print that was published in the 16th century. And so I wonder, what differences do you notice between the two? What do you observe about this version of the piece? What surprises you? What don't you understand? What questions do you have about what's on the screen here? Feel free to share. Please.
In the other piece, there were more parts.
There sure were. Okay, we've only got the tenor part. And actually, this was not supposed to be the first slide in the sequence. I've already circled the, but I forgot to add an initial blank slide at the beginning. So yeah, I've circled the 5 voices. That's quintus vocibus, quinque vocibus is the VOC thing you see top left. And then tenor, we've only got the tenor voice here because in this period, pieces like this were typically published in sets of books where you just had one voice part in the book and you didn't get to see any of the other music. So you only had your own voice part. Definitely changes the way you engage with the piece as a singer, for sure. That's a great observation. Any others?
There's no measure mark.
No vertical lines on the part to tell you kind of where you are in the piece. So again, something that will change the way you have to deal with the printed copy for sure. It means you listen to other people singing with you in quite a different way because you don't have these vertical lines to help line up where everybody is. Right.
Are there rests? I don't see any rest markings.
Interesting question. They're very small. It's hard to see because this screen is a bit small. I think actually I can blow it up a bit here.
It also looks like the notes don't have any value to them.
I can blow it up just a little bit there.
They do.
Yeah, so let me just point out the rests.
There's a treble clap.
Yeah, the clap.
Right, so that'll be let me get there in 1 second. The rests are, and it's hard to show this to the folks who are on Zoom, but I will be able to point you to, for example, this vertical line here is a rest. They're very skinny and tall. That vertical line and this little tick mark there is a rest. And that tick mark is a rest. And in fact, they're actually the same as our modern rests. That is a
Jamie, they can't see you.
I know, and I'm sorry to the people who are on Zoom. I'm showing the folks in the room the rests, and they are these vertical, very skinny vertical lines here. And so they end up being the same as our modern rests. They're just skinnier. So the whole note rest is one that hangs down from the line, and the half note rest is one that sits on top of the line. They're just skinnier. That's all. And then a question about the notes look very different. Who was the one who observed that?
I thought they looked all the same.
The notes look,
They all
yeah,
look like they're worth one beat.
they are definitely different. They're not actually all the same because if you see there's a note that's just a diamond, and then next to it a note that's a diamond with a line on the top. And then there are some other notes that are colored in or filled in and are black. And there are also some notes that have dots next to them. And so they look different than our modern notes because they're kind of square. They're like a rhombus. but they are actually the same notes, just with different note heads and some different conventions for how they appear on the page. But again, all this, and then someone said clefs for sure. That's the clef where the green arrow ends. It's that box-like thing next the head of the green arrow is a clef. So it tells you that the note C is on the second line from the top in this particular part. And then this is what we would now call a time signature. They would call it something more like a mensuration sign. It's basically giving you equivalent information, but it's just the understanding of how time is kept in this music's a little different. But we still have that symbol today. C with a line through it. If anyone is a music reader, we still have that today in our modern time signature system, C with a line through it.
I don't know about the other people attending remotely, but I can't hear anything anymore. Jamie's just frozen on the screen. Do you hear anything, Christina, Louise?
No, it's frozen.
Okay, just want to make sure it wasn't just my screen. Maybe Jamie can hear us saying this.
Yeah, this is Alice. I can't hear anything either.
I'm not sure what Jamie can do about it, unfortunately, but presumably he can hear us.
And now I don't see the music anymore. I see us.
Same here. Hi, Christina, I'm looking at
Hi.
you. You look good.
Thank you.
I don't know if any of them in church know this.
Okay, are we back with you on Zoom here?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Sorry for the technical problem.
Okay, thank you for listening.
I think we've rescued things, yes. So tons of differences here. There's more we could go into, but each one of these tells us some different information about not just sort of how people would have sung the piece, but the ways they would have thought about music and engaged with it. Something very basic like the fact that there's just the one part on the page, fundamental difference in the way you think about how the piece is put together, how it would have been composed, how you would sing it, how you would experience it. And so that's really important to pay attention to those details. And then the interesting detail too is you would have noticed this is in Latin, right?
They didn't sing it in Latin.
Sorry?
They didn't sing it.
We actually did sing it in Latin. We did sing it in Latin.
She thought it was German.
That's no, it's yeah. And we did sing it in Latin. And this is the kind of question you might not even think to ask because of our sort of context today. But this is not a piece that would have been sung in a Church of England church in the 16th century, being in Latin. Almost no places that we know of had any kind of worship that involved Latin. The question of Oxford chapels is like maybe a rare exception, but even the Queen's Chapel, there's zero evidence that they ever had worship service in Latin or with any sung Latin of any kind after the Reformation, right? After Elizabeth I came to the throne. And this is printed in 1575. So it's during the reign of Elizabeth I. It's not even technically a church piece, right? And yet it's kind of a really important part of the tradition that we've inherited in this place in terms of what choirs sing, right? And what choirs use to worship. And so again, that gives us a totally different window on sort of what it means and its history. And I sort of gave it up a little bit. The larger publication, it actually tells you that on the title page. So canciones, songs, and then it says quae ab argumento sacrae vocantur, which means which on account of their content might be considered sacred. Okay, so in other words, it's not really telling you, yes, they're definitely church songs or they're definitely sacred songs. It's like they're songs that you could call sacred because they have sacred content. So it's a very kind of wishy-washy way of referring to what the, you know, what the status of the piece is. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And then it was a joint publication of Tallis and Bird, Toma Talizio et Guglielmo Birdo. That's Thomas Tallis and William Byrd. And so published jointly by them in 1575. Half the motets were by Tallis, half were by Byrd. And because they had been given a monopoly on printing, music printing by the Queen. And so they leaned into it and they made some money off of it. Or they tried to make some money off of it. So the kind of thing that I'm trying to get us to learn how to do here is to look at a modern score, whatever the type of piece is, and you know, what are even the most basic kinds of things we can ask questions about of a piece, right? That might test our assumptions about what it is or what it means. And so that brings me back to our first hymn. And I want us to sing just the last verse of this again. And then we're going to look at the original version of this and see if that changes anything for us. So let's just sing that verse 3. And together, and here's our E again, and then we'll finish the hymn ourselves. I heard the voice of Jesus say, I am this dark wood's light. Look unto me, your morn shall rise, and all your day be bright. I looked to Jesus, and I found in him my star, my sun. And in that light of life I'll walk till pilgrim days are done. Wonderful. Here's how the original version of that looked in 1567, when this tune was first published. What do you notice now about the tune? What surprises you? What are additional questions that are raised for you?
Can you go?
Particularly in the way, yeah, yes, we've got
Because
a.
I don't see, you said, here's how it looked. I don't see anything. I'm just looking at you.
Oh, you're not, oh, you know what? The screen share was disabled, I think, when we lost you. Let me share my screen. That's my apology there. Here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, lovely. Okay, great.
Oh, there it is.
There we are. So can we just actually take another 30 seconds and just give our friends on Zoom an extra 30 seconds to see, you know, what do you notice now about this tune? What surprises you about it? What are additional questions that are raised for you by having sung it, seeing the way that it looks on a modern score, looking at this old piece of music, the way it's rendered there? Things, you know, things that are sort of, that have newly been revealed to you.
So there are other parts that, I mean,
That's a funny thing about this particular one, is that because this was given so with the intention of having a choir that could sing a harmony with the tune. So it's actually given all the harmony on the page, in case you were in a place that had a choir that could sing in harmony. Yeah.
The melodies in the tenor, is that?
Yeah.
usual?
The tune is given in the tenor, da dee 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 da dee dee dum, which is why I've boxed it
I
here.
would expect it in mean, but that's just.
And the tenor is the third part down from the top. So mean is not unlike our soprano part today. Contratenor is like our alto part today. and then tenor, and then bass. You can see on the lower right there. And that's right. So this is a convention from the 16th century and earlier, where tenor comes from the Latin tenere, which means to hold. And so the tenor was the holder of often the chant melody if it was a piece that was adorning a Gregorian chant or something. And so the tenor would hold that chant melody. And so this is kind of a holdover from that, where the tenor is the primary carrier of the melody. And so that's a really good point. So if they might have sung this in harmony, it would have sounded different because the melody would be kind of buried in there. And the top voice you heard wouldn't have the melody, it would have a different line. Yeah. I mean, the thing that to me would be something that I would notice that we could all feel, and we may not have even sort of realized what we were feeling at the time, is if you go back, we had talked about the bar lines.
I just said.
So, and it's funny because if you look, and if you're a music reader and you tried to scan it out, you might get a little confused. But if you actually look where the bar lines are, it's really just at the end of each phrase of text, right? So not unlike actually the version in our hymnal does a similar thing, where it really doesn't, it's not so interested in the kind of the meter or the rhythm in that sense. It's using bar lines to help show you visually where the lines of text are. Just a bit of a different way visually of helping to organize a piece of music. And it's sort of, so in this sense, the original print and our hymnal are kind of in alignment on using the bar line as a tool to help singers kind of like have a sense for where the phrase endings are. But another thing that does is it means the sense of where the beat is often kind of changes around in this piece. So in the third line, I came to Jesus as I was. Those kind of, the sense of where the weight is often shifting. And it's not in a steady 2 or a steady 3. It's not in a kind of steady meter. And so I think that is kind of in keeping with this original sense of, what bar lines do and how flexible the music can be in terms of shifting meter at whenever it needs to. So that's just like one example of something. And so I think, this is where I want to draw to a close and just invite you to ask any questions that have been raised for you by this. I hope that you get a sense for, I'm a very detail-oriented person. And it's one of the things that inspired me is finding these little things and asking, well, what does that mean? Why is that there? What am I assuming when I pick up a piece of paper or I listen to a piece of music? What am I thinking I already know about this piece that I should ask a question about? Where can I begin to press for interesting extra details and rabbit holes and things like that? So I think I just invite you to ask any questions you want of me about these pieces or about anything really. Yeah.
I'm always curious as to how, I know that often, or most of the time, or some of the time, conventionally, the music is chosen by you and by the priest, and I don't know if the choir has any.
Oh, yeah, we get a say in everything.
So how did you happen to choose this particular piece to be where it was in the service today? Why not one of, I don't know how many you could have chosen. Why this?
Our O Sacrum setting. I chose it because when I read the gospel over, I was just thinking about kind of eternity and eternal life. And so this text is very much about our forward looking, right, to eternity, to the celestial banquet. And the giving a perspective on what it means for us to make the Eucharist together. What does that mean? Well, one important meaning is that it's a foretaste of the heavenly banquet. And so that was the sort of chain of thought for me. that was the main thing. I mean, there's always lots of different things that I sort of shape my music choices, but that was the sort of way in, I think.
I thought that the hymn and the Tallis piece were very comforting. It just seemed very reassuring and just very peaceful pieces, nothing to do with the mechanics that you've been discussing. But just,
That's what I was gonna say.
we
too.
did have the English words in our program. I know the choir was singing it in Latin, but we had the English words of the Tallis piece, and, you know, we can read those words of the hymn, and I thought they were both very comforting.
It was very meditative. I thought. You know, I saw myself sitting by my lake in the summer and just sort of having that in my ear. Maybe.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's what it did. Both of those. I don't know the words here, but in the hymn, certainly.
We've attended in Stile Moderno concerts where they followed the old custom of 4 people sitting around a table. With a score that has the parts printed in 4 different directions. I never thought to ask, did the composer assume that there would be just 4 voices? Was that how they were meant to be? Or are there lots of other people singing them too in a very different format? And how does that compare with what's going on here?
That is such an interesting and complicated question, especially depending on what period and context you're talking about. I think the example of the table format book you're referring to, where they printed these books of 4-part music that you had, you know, it's like you're sitting around a table. So the book faces one part this way, faces one part that way, faces one part this way, and faces one part this way. So you can't read it just the whole thing like that. You have to turn around the table so that you can all sit around a table and sing. And so I think in that context, it's pretty clear to me you're thinking of one voice per part. There are other sort of times and places in history where we have evidence that points us in different directions. And so scholars have had really fierce debates about, is this supposed to be 1 per part or more than 1 per part? You know, that came up most famously with the music, with the cantatas of Bach, J.S. Bach. Because in the 19th century and early 20th century, they would sing those with huge choirs, you know, 40, 50, 100 people even. And then there was people who started doing with smaller choirs, and eventually people did them with just 1 voice per part. And so they had some historical evidence to suggest to them that that was how that would have been done in the 18th century. But it's not, I don't know that it's a totally settled question among scholars. And so it also depends, you know, which context you're talking about. This type of music was most likely intended for sort of well-off folks who might, after dinner, grab some music books from the closet, and that's their evening's recreation, is just singing some songs together. And so, you know, that's why, so in that sense, it's probably also 1 voice per part. In churches, in the Church of England churches, you might have had more than that. But then also there were Catholics in England having tiny secret services where they could never have more than 1 person per part because they had to be secret, you know, and they were small. So,
So I think, I mean, there's some scholarship too that composers who were commissioned by either monasteries or nunneries too. I mean, they would write for 4-part women and for 4-part men.
Right.
At the time too. So, which some of them get transcribed into SATB, though, but the original wasn't SATB expected.
And I think those are both these points are really great because they illustrate how knowing the context that a piece of music comes out of tells you so much about it. You know, tells you who it's for, right? And that tells us, you know, how it might have been done.
At what point in the trajectory of Tallis's career as a composer did he entertain having a Latin text as opposed to an Anglican text?
That's a great question. I mean, so he started as serving in the Chapel Royal under Henry VIII. So at that time, actually, Latin was still the principal language of worship. And this is the late 1530s, early 1540s. In the 1540s, English started entering the worship practice of the Church of England. And then Tallis served under Mary, under Edward VI, under Mary I, and under Elizabeth I. So he served 4 sovereigns.
And he kept his head.
And he kept his head.
I was thinking that, and you said it.
And so he wrote music first in Latin, then in English, then in Latin, then in English, of all different kinds of, he was producing all different things. Yeah.
Quick
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looked to be 80.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely died in 1585, so well into the reign of Elizabeth. We don't know exactly when he was born. But yeah. Question back here.
Is theme that we first saw, the theme that's incorporated the following?
It sure is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I sang it for my wife Melanie the other day, and she was like, "Oh, that's from the Vaughan Williams piece." Yeah.
The Vaughan Williams piece being.
Oh, it's called a Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite some very, very big and more kind of dramatic and kind of stretched out. Yeah. Much more romantic, sort of, quote
Sounds
unquote.
thought of.
Probably. I would assume so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
At what point did the
Jamie, I
part books
have-
give way to the
Oh.
to scores that were 4-part or more?
Oh, fantastic question. So that starts to happen really around the year 1600. And I say around because it's a long, complicated, drawn out process. But this is the moment in time where, and I say this, 1575 is when O Sacrum Convivium was published. That's really kind of just when people are starting to kind of think about stacking the voice parts in this kind of music and creating scored. But I think that it might be a little after that, but it's sort of around the year 1600, roughly.
Are you doing another one of these next week, Jamie? Or is it?
Next week, no, I'm not doing it next
Okay.
week.
Well, thank you. Very interesting. Really appreciated it.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. And, you can always email me with questions at music@goodshepherdnoon.org if you need, or catch me at coffee hour. Thanks so much.
Jamie, one last thought and question.
One last thought.
Do you, as our organist, let's see if you can hear me, but do you, as our organist and also our choir, do you feel a difference when you sing Latin versus singing the English? I feel it in the liturgy when we sing Latin, but what do you think?
Do I feel a difference? I think so. I think I do. But I think it also just depends on the piece. It occurs to me that certain Latin texts, I've sung so often and I kind of know what they translate as. So I feel so familiar with it that it has the same impact as feeling like it were a native language. A good example would be like Ave Verum Corpus is a Eucharistic text where, I've sung so many settings of it. And when I come back to those settings, a lot of times it doesn't feel like it's in a foreign language because I'm so familiar with it. And so I think the feeling then becomes much more like it's a native tongue, as if I were singing in English. But of course, then, for so many other folks who have so much less experience either with those pieces or with Latin, it's obviously going to be different. And if you're just sitting listening to some Latin and you can't even understand what the words are, that might be even harder to kind of engage with, right? So I think it would be so different for lots of different people. But for me, yeah, I think sometimes there is a difference. sometimes it's smaller than other times. So.
Was it hard for you?
I-
For you, you guys have a lot of experience.
Hard.
Just to sing words that are not like, thank you, God, sing to the glory.
Well, I mean,
in your
it's
lap.
thinking so long, and he's right, the more settings you get, it is like visiting an old friend in a way. So I don't find, it's just, oh, this is the 4/8 setting a little bit, or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for anybody in the choir.
I think we come to it from a very personal space. So I know there's music out there that I find hard in a liturgical setting. And so, but that's a personal piece. It's very personal. And that might be common.
I think it depends so much on just people's experience. You know, if they're coming into the choir and they don't have a lot of experience in, you know, churches where Latin is sung, that might be a bigger stretch, you know, possibly.
What I can add, I grew up with the Latin Mass and Tantum Ergo, and we sang everything, every hymn was in Latin. And so it has a reverence for me spiritually when even going over the session that you did today, for me spiritually, the Latin has a certain reverence, a certain spirituality, a certain holiness that I'm not going to quite get from my everyday colloquial language. So when I hear it in Latin and the reverence, the way the choir presents it, the way you sing to us, the holiness on the altar, there's that's what I was more referring to. I feel almost closer to God because it's in Latin. I feel closer to the earlier church. That's what I was referring to. The Latin means so much to me because I grew up with Latin and we studied Latin for 4 years, and there's just such a reverence in a different hymn that we sing English versus Latin. I'm glad that our Good Shepherd includes a Latin, and sometimes that we have a solo in Latin.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Chris?
I was about to observe that one of the harder things we do as a choir is to do justice for the native pronunciation of foreign languages. And in fact, some things sound absolutely awful if you use modern American pronunciation for the words. So we have to be very careful to honor the actual vowel sounds that should be coming.
Translating Hamilton into German.
Exactly.
No, I noticed when Brad was singing that at one point you rolled your R
Yeah.
as opposed to just a hard R.
Yeah.
See, they do pay attention.
That was my early training, and I couldn't, I mean, that was what my choral director taught me in high school. I couldn't tell you what scholarship that's based on, but the small.
Who knows?
Part was just a convention I've always had, and I hope it's still current.
Keep it up.
I don't know. I mean,
It seemed when you rolled the R, it didn't bring kind of a stop.
Oh, yeah, you need to prevent you from going to R or two.
the beauty of performance is that as a performer, ultimately, you have the choice of what to do. There can be all the scholarship in the world, but in that moment of performance, you get to choose.
And I always listen to my
Excellent. I certainly would encourage that. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, everyone on Zoom, for listening as well and coming and joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
So much.